Hello there, my name's Bernard Spong. I came to South Africa as a missionary of the London Missionary Society in 1963. Now, one of the first jobs I had was to hold the final services at Tigerkloof Institution, a once thriving mission school that was closed under the Group Areas Act. On November 27th, 1963, we held a service in the church and then came here to the gateway and we closed the gate. Not a very auspicious beginning for a missionary, because of course mission work is about opening gates, not closing them. It's about moving into new areas. All the more reason, therefore, why I'm so delighted this weekend in September 1999 to join together with hundreds of other members of the United Congregational Church, the successor to the London Missionary Society, here at Tigerkloof and in other places around the Northern Cape, to celebrate 200 years since the first LMS missionaries arrived. We're here to remember, we are here to rejoice, and we're here to renew ourselves for the gates that are now open, the open gates of mission in the new Southern Africa.
It is appropriate after 200 years for us to celebrate, but it is also a time for us to take stock, a time for us to gather as a church and plan and reflect and look ahead. So it's not so much either one thing or the other. It's a combination of factors which brought us to this moment of celebration. And we are finding that we are in celebration mode. Without trying to force anything, we are finding that we are in fact celebrating.
The celebrations included a march through Freiburg and a rally in a local stadium.
We are remembering, rejoicing and renewing. Firstly, we are clearly remembering 200 years of Christian witness in Southern Africa, more specifically of the missionary movement in Southern Africa and of the heritage that that missionary movement has left with the congregational churches in Southern Africa. So we are remembering where we are coming from as a congregational church. We are remembering our journey since 1799, the joys and the difficult times of the past, and we're remembering God's grace in it all.
Now, the United Congregational Church is made up of three main streams and one later stream. The three streams are the London Missionary Society, the American Board Mission, which came out of Boston, and the Congregational Union of South Africa, which was largely out of the settler Congregationalists from Britain, and much later the Disciples of Christ. These are the four streams that make up what is today the United Congregational Church of Southern Africa in 5 countries around Southern Africa. I think some very important names in the history of the country of South Africa, as well as the other countries, immediately come to mind. Albert Luthuli for one, Johannes van der Kemp for another, Seretse Khama for another. These are important figures in the history of Southern Africa. And then we could continue, because many of the leaders of the 19th century development of Southern Africa came out of the missionary movement, and many of them were London Missionary Societies or American Board. Daniel Lindley, for example, was the pastor to the Trekkers in the 1840s. David Livingstone, perhaps the preeminent figure in Southern Africa and Central African history in the 19th century, was a London Missionary Society leader who started off at the Moffat Mission in Kuruman, and his father-in-law was Robert Moffat, who had started the Moffat Mission, or at least was the main figure there, and stayed there for well over 50 years. Stamping his enormous personality on the Botswana people and on that whole region. If we go down to the Cape, John Phillip, who came out in the 1830s, became both notorious and a heroic figure. Notorious because he was the leader of the anti-slavery movement and therefore notorious amongst the settler community. Heroic precisely for the same reason. John Philip traveled all over what is now what became the Cape Province as the director of the London Missionary Society. We shouldn't forget his wife, Jane, who stayed back home in Cape Town. And the history of Cape Town in the early part of the 19th century is influenced to a remarkable extent by Jane's work amongst the children of former slaves, starting schools, working amongst women. I think a very important element in the whole history of the London Missionary Society and the American Board Mission was the role of the women, the wives of the missionaries, and other women missionaries who came out but who are often forgotten in the narrative.
The legacy of those early pioneers includes a concern for human rights. It's shown itself in the life of the church, all the way from John Phillips's stand against slavery through to its opposition to apartheid, led in the 1970s and early 80s by the first General Secretary of the United Congregational Church, the Reverend Joseph Wing. Another important tradition is the church's commitment to ecumenism. The early missionaries established Christian communities rather than denominational institutions. And although a particular denomination has now evolved, there's a strong emphasis on partnership. And the church has been an active participant in the activities of the South African Council of Churches. Lay participation in a leadership role is another emphasis. It is, as its name suggests, a church of congregations. People gathered together for worship and service. As South Africa developed and people moved, it was not always the missionaries who established the congregations.
It was the community, Christian community in the mines that organized themselves into the church. They became the first missionaries in that area. And when the church grew, they then invited the missionaries to come and support the work, to consolidate the work.
The relationship to the mission of the American Foreign Mission Board to the UCCSA a long time ago was really one of coming to Africa to save souls. It's very different now. The relationship now is more one of partnership, of working together in God's mission in this whole world.
The Council for World Mission is a partnership of about 31 churches across all the continents. First of all, involving the former Congregational and Presbyterian churches, but especially since 1972, we have taken on board many other churches. Our primary purpose for existing is that of sharing this good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ that we have. We do so through the sharing of people in mission, the sharing of resources that we have, the sharing of ideas, because the most important thing now is a transformation of people to help people become better equipped to face the challenges in the world.
You know, when I and others have reflected on what the mission did in the past and what it did well, yes, in a different context, one of the things that really struck us is the role the mission played in building up leadership, leadership in church, leadership in community, and that to a large extent the emphasis put on education in the London Missionary Society missions in this part of the country, starting here in the Moffat School and then moving ultimately to Tigerkloof. And so one of the challenges we've taken on is to produce leaders. We no longer have a formal school here at Kuruman, but we have what we call the MILI, the Moffat Education and Leadership Institute, and that works at producing and working with leaders in the communities, rural development forums, village community organizations, school governing bodies. And then paralleling that in the church context, we have the Kalahari Desert School of Theology. And that focus is really on equipping leaders within the church community, lay predominantly, but also ordained.
The partnership now involves not the traditional north to south, but south to south. south to east, people from Taiwan working in Jamaica, people from Zambia working in Guyana, people from the United Kingdom going to the Netherlands, people from the Netherlands going to Bangladesh. Now people go across the world, cross frontiers, sharing the love of Christ with them, incarnating that love that God has given to them with other people.
I see the UCCSA maintaining its ecumenical heritage, redoubling its efforts to be one of the churches torchbearers for ecumenism in Southern Africa. I see us trying to broaden our base as congregational churches even into Angola. I see us standing alongside our sister churches in a post-apartheid South Africa and Southern Africa, with the new Cairo that face us, finding anew our prophetic voice and our prophetic witness. So I see us moving ahead confidently, but with all the richness of our heritage, but as always depending on God's strength and on God's grace.
I think congregationalism has always been critical of developments in the South African context. We were very vocal in opposing the system of apartheid. We had a very active role in the promotion of resistance against the system. And I think in the current period, we need to support economic and political developments in our country. But the most critical role of the church is to focus in the area of moral reconstruction. In other words, the United Congregational Church, amongst many other churches under the Council of Churches, should play a very important role in promoting a new value system. And in keeping with the call of our government, even Mr. Thabo Mbeki, I think we have a major challenge to provide South Africa new moral values, values that will shape who we are as a people.
Mission in the new millennium, I think, depends so much on the context in which people find themselves and the kind of challenges around them. I think one key issue in the new millennium is going to be the whole area of urban mission. As more and more people move into cities, facing issues like homelessness, issues like the isolation of being in a large city and yet not knowing anybody, and possibly more and more issues like lack of water, lack of power, as the cities perhaps don't have the infrastructure to cope. I think another issue in urban mission is going to be, particularly in the South African context, is as the Group Areas Act changes, certainly in the suburbs, previous white areas, is how does the church enable congregations, communities of people to belong and feel part of the same church, the same community of faith? And what are the challenges there? How do people who perhaps have ministered in one kind of congregation now work in this changed environment? Well, the challenge of rural mission really is quite different to that of urban mission. I think the issues that people are facing there, such as poverty, unemployment, lack of access to basic needs, and I think one of the big issues we find in rural areas is the brain drain. And anybody with skills and potentials, anybody who really, I suppose, could make it, particularly young people, go on to university and don't come back. And so the whole area of leadership, of resourcing human resources in the community and the church are big challenges, I think, in mission in rural areas.
The church, I think, must come to the terms with the fact that in particularly predominantly African communities, faith is beginning to be marginalized. It's beginning to move from the center stage of society to become one of the voices due to the rapid secularization of society and pluralism in religious circles. And that, therefore, the church has to begin to find new, imaginative and creative ways of expressing the gospel.
I mentioned already the role of Jane Phillip and other women, and the role of women in our church is important, has always been important. What has not been the case has been acknowledging its importance. And there I think we can be rightly criticized. We have been as patriarchal as any other denomination, but that shouldn't in any way hide the fact of the enormous contribution that women have played, and I think will play even more so in the future.
I don't think I was quite welcome amongst the males at first, because I can say that over the years, most of the opposition that I felt came to me from the male ministers of religion. I have no complaints about the congregations in which I've worked over the years. I've been accepted. There have been a few that might have had their prejudices against women in the ministry.
Women today in the church are in new roles of leadership, both in the United States and here in South Africa. And that's one of the more exciting things that is happening in the churches today. We're trying to be more of a church that's inclusive of all God's people and finding ways to honor all of the gifts of the people of God.
I do believe that is so. There is a special place. I don't think we need ever feel that we are in competition with men. You have your own particular way of dealing with challenges and going about your work. And I don't think that we can, even if we try, we cannot imitate the men. You have your own particular style according to your own personality, and guided by your faith and your own commitment to the word and sacrament.
In the world around them, through facilities.
And
like
what
the
about
United
young
States and all
people?
the like.
What is their hope in the church?
The church deliberately attempting to empower the young people to become the vehicle, the wheels on which the gospel moves into the new millennium is the greatest hope that the young people could hold, not just for themselves, but for the church and for the future of Christianity in Southern Africa.
Remembering alone, it's fine. Rejoicing is also appropriate, but we can't leave it there. We have to renew in order to gain new strength and a new vision and hope for the future. We have to renew because we cannot be a stagnant church. Renewal is the stuff for ministry and mission in our day. And we are standing on the threshold of a new millennium, and there's a real need and a sense for newness within the life of the church. So we are also praying and planning for renewal into the next 200 years and the next millennium as a church. And again, we are depending on the renewal which comes from the Holy Spirit.
The climax of all the celebrations was a large service held here at the Moffat Church in Kuruman. This is the first mission station built north of the Orange River. It is here that Robert Moffat built this beautiful church when he only had 10 converts after 10 years of activity. It's here that they translated the Bible into Tswana, here that they printed it, the first Bible printed in an African language. It's a place steeped in the history of the London Missionary Society and the United Congregational Church. But it's not only got a history, it also has a dynamic present, and it has a hopeful future with new mission activity under the directorship of the Reverend Stephen de Gruchy.
When we knew that the Assembly would be having its Sunday service here at the Mission, we were honored by that, and we started to think of an appropriate way in which to celebrate having the 200th anniversary Assembly here. And it struck us that really what we're dealing with here is the past and the present and future. And we've got many old buildings here at the Mission, which symbolize the past. And part of our slogan for this Assembly has been to remember. And so we remember these old buildings, this church behind me, other old buildings that were built by Robert Moffat in the 1800s. But we've erected the bicentenary arch, which stands halfway between the old buildings, the heritage site, and the new buildings, the library, the conference center, the media center, the offices which house our community and church leadership work, which symbolize today and tomorrow, the present and the future. And this archway really stands as a constant reminder that mission happens between the past and the future. It remembers, and in remembering it rejoices, but it rejoices also because there's a future. And so on Assembly Sunday, all the delegates on their way to the church are going to pass through this bicentenary arch, and they unveil a plaque symbolizing the connection between the past and the present, and reminding us that mission is a constant challenge for today.